I'm Wendy from shinyhappyworld.com, and today I'm going to show you how to use elastic, specifically how to put elastic in a waistband for a casing, and also a couple of tips on using elastic in general. I'm going to show you two different kinds of elastic. These are the kinds of elastic that I use most often. This, I think, is usually called a braided elastic. I buy mine by the yard, so I don't have any packaging with it, and I just grab the one that's flat and smooth. This is not so great for using in a waistband casing because it will tend to twist and roll, and then you'll get those annoying bumpy waistbands. You'll use this on applications where you're actually stitching it to the inside of the waistband, like you would see on, for example, a pair of men's boxer shorts or sometimes on pajama pants. So that's what this elastic is. And then this one is the one that I use more often. This is a non-rolling elastic, and it's got these kind of lines that go up and down in there, and it feels in general heavier, a little bit stiffer. This does not tend to twist inside your clothing once you get it in there. So this is what you use when you're doing an elastic or a waistband casing, where you're just going to sew a tube for the elastic to go in and then thread it in and be done with it. So I want to tell you one thing that a lot of people don't know until you do it the first time. You need to pre-stretch your elastic before you measure anything. You want to stretch it out as far as it's going to go. You just have to do it once. And the first time you do it, you'll hear kind of a crackling, popping sound. And this just takes out some of the initial stretch. A lot of times, when I first started sewing, I didn't realize this, and I would measure it and slide it in, and all of a sudden it would just be like way longer than it needed to be. And somebody finally told me that you need to pre-stretch the elastic. So that's a little elastic tip for you. And then as far as cutting the elastic, you measure around the waistband, and then I usually cut it 1 inch longer than that. You're going to overlap the ends, and you actually want it to fit with a little bit of stretch in there. So that's going to give you more than you need, and then you're going to fit it, adjust it, actually try it on, and make sure it fits. So this will give you plenty of overlap so you won't get it in there and have it be too short. So now I'm going to show you how to sew the casing. Okay, I've already pressed the first fold in here. This is 3/8 of an inch. So when you are figuring out the allowance that you want to give, the extra fabric that you want to cut in the length of something so that you have enough to fold a casing on there, you want to add 3/8 of an inch, and then you're going to add one more measurement, and that is the width of the elastic plus another 1/4 inch. I'm going to use 1 inch elastic in here, so I've set my hem gauge to 1 1/4 inches, and that's what I'm going to do the second time around. So I'm going to fold this down 1 1/4 inches and press it. And then I'm going to do another 1 1/4 inches, just down a little ways. Smooth that down and press it. I'm going to work my way all the way around the skirt. This is a skirt that I'm making. So I'm going to do another 1 1/4 inches, smooth it, make sure I'm getting it flat. The reason I do 1 1/4 inches, even though I'm putting just a 1 inch elastic in there, is so that I have 1/8 of an inch. I'm going to sew my seam, I'm going to sew this casing down 1/8 of an inch from the edge, and then I have another 1/8 of an inch just to give me a little bit of play for that elastic, and I'll show you the sewing in just a moment. So I'm going to finish working my way around here, and then we're going to go to the sewing machine. Okay, I've got this pressed all the way around, and now I'm getting ready to sew. This is my back seam. I don't know if you can see it right here behind the presser foot. That's the center back seam. So I've moved forward a little bit. I'm going to leave a little bit open there so I can get the elastic in. First I'm going to back stitch a couple of stitches, and then I'm going to sew all the way around, and I'm just sewing pretty much as close as I can to that folded edge. I've got about 1/8 of an inch there, maybe even a little bit less, and that's okay. I just want to get it as close as I can to that folded line without actually going off of it. So I'm going to sew all the way around this, and I'm going to stop when I have about 3 inches open, and I'll show you that when we get to it. Okay, I'm coming up to the center back seam. Here's the center back seam. This is where I started, and I want to stop stitching right about here so that I've got a couple of inches open to work that elastic in, and also to get the edges, the ends of the elastic stitched together. You want to have a little bit of room there. So I'm going to finish this up, back stitch, and now we're going to go back to my work table. Okay, I'm not going to show you actually threading it into the skirt. I sewed up this little sample thing out of gauze so you can see what's happening inside here. It's really kind of hard to describe sometimes. So I put the biggest safety pin I have on the end of the elastic, and that is going to help me push it through. And it's a little tricky to get started because you need to get it flat in there. And you're just going to start working it into that tube. Once you get it going and get it flat in there, you're going to push a whole bunch of fabric up onto that safety pin, and then you're going to slide that fabric. It's actually a little tricky with this gauze, but you can at least see what's happening. You're going to slide this fabric down the elastic, and when you get it pulled down, you're going to push some more up onto that safety pin, and then pull it so that it's inside the tube. And you're going to keep working that all the way through, and this is just a short little section. And when you're done, you want to just pull it all the way down so that it's nice and smooth. And that way your folds, your gathers, are going to be pretty even on there. And this has gotten twisted around, and sometimes that happens while you're threading it through there. See, it started with this end against the stitching, and then it ended up with the opposite end against the stitching. Just work it through, and usually all you have to do is kind of stretch it a few times. Stretch it, and there. Now it all just settled in. And now you have a nice smooth piece of elastic in there. So I'm going to go thread the elastic through the skirt, and then we'll come back and I'll show you how to join the ends together. Okay, one thing that I forgot to tell you was that you'll want to pin your tail end to the fabric here so you don't actually accidentally pull it all the way through. So I've got my elastic threaded all the way through. I've unpinned my tail end here. And now I'm going to overlap these pieces a bit and pin them together. And before I actually sew them together and sew the casing closed, I need to test out this length. So pin them together the way you think it'll fit, then let that end tuck up, kind of stretch it out a little bit, get the gathers evenly distributed, and now go try it on the person that you're trying it on. You can adjust the overlap that you've got pinned in there. Try it on as many times as you need to and get that all adjusted until it's the right length. And then come back and I'll show you how to sew it closed. Okay, I tested it. It fits. This is the exact amount of overlap that I want. So I'm going to hold that together, and I'm going to take the safety pin out, and I'm going to keep holding this together. I switched out my needle for a stretch needle. When you're sewing through the elastic, it happens a lot that your thread will break or it'll skip some stitches on the bottom. It doesn't like sewing through the rubbery threads that are inside the elastic. So you want to sew very slowly, and I found that having the stretch needle in there sometimes helps. So I'm going to put it under here. I'm holding those layers together so my length that I tested is right. And I'm going to sew just along the edge here. I backstitched at the beginning to knot it off, and now I'm going to sew right up to the edge of this elastic. And then I'm going to turn my needle down, raise my presser foot, and I'm going to turn this so now I'm sewing across the width of the elastic. And same thing, put my needle down, turn it a quarter turn, and now I'm going to sew down this length. length, and that other piece of elastic is underneath here, right about here. So I'm going to put my finger there so I know. Needle down and a quarter turn. So the first thing I do is basically sew a big box. One more time, and now I do an X across that box. So I'm going to go from corner to corner of that rectangle. Needle down. I'm going to go up the short length, so it's going to get a little extra stitching there. Needle down, and now I'm going to complete the X. So I'm going to go across from the other corners. And this is my other corner here. And back stitch. And I can take it out. This is a really secure way to stitch elastic. What you don't want is that elastic, those ends, to come loose at all once you are inside the casing, because then you got to pick it open and it's just a whole big thing. So now you slide it into the casing. Just stretch it and it should fit right in there. And you need to sew that casing closed now. So I just need to complete that little bit of stitching that I hadn't done yet. So I make sure that I'm not sewing through the elastic. I'm sewing through the fold of the fabric. Here's the edge of the elastic, and I'm going to sew down as close as I can get to that fold. So I'm going to back stitch a little bit, stitch forward a few, and then when I get right to that seam, I have a little thing I do. I cut a little piece of ribbon. I cut it about 5 inches long. One of the things about handmade clothes is that kids have trouble telling which is the front and which is the back, because they learn to look for the tag in their back of their clothes. So I tuck this ribbon up under there, so I'll catch it in my stitching as I stitch it closed, and it's just a little sign there that tells kids this is the back of the garment. Oops, I slid off of there. The elastic pushed me out, so I'm going to back up. Shift over there. Okay, I'm going to go really slow here. This is where the elastic is double thick and it's wanting to push me off. There we go. Back stitch. And we're done. So that's it. That's how you work with elastic. Remember to choose the right kind of elastic for the right project. If it's going in a casing, you want to use that non-roll elastic. And then always remember to pre-stretch the elastic before you measure the length of it, because that really will make a difference. I'm Wendy from shinyhappyworld.com. I'll see you next time.